Hello, this is the Green Report, Rappler Show on the environment and the stories of people whose decisions impact the world around us. I'm Ia Gozum,
And I'm G. Geronimo.
and just like that, we're almost halfway through the year. Sobrang bilis ng...
Halain mo yun, no?
May na tayo, magsi 6 months na tayo. So ano na nga bang nangyari, G?
Parang nung January, nagpe-predict lang tayo. Predict!
Ngayon, nasa
To forecast lang tayo.
Stories so far. And speaking of
Hottest. Oo. Literally, syempre siguro that the most recent issue na kinailangan, and this was a topic of our last episode, was the extreme heat that we experienced. And actually, nag-declare na ang Pag-asa na tag-ulan na. But
yes.
as you can see,
natin last weekend.
oo, but as you can see, it's still hot actually, and we still feel the heat kapag walang bagyo. So El Nino and extreme heat was both some of the most pressing issue na kinailangan nating
Diba?
Kasi it's also because ramdam na ramdam kasi natin ang extreme heat. Like hindi mo maikakaila ang extreme heat and how people are affected by it.
And the heat seeps through the bones.
Wow, seeps through the bones. Oo.
Talagang ramdam na ramdam mo. Kaya, just like what we tackled nung last episode, na nabanggit nga natin, our coverage of extreme heat, it went through different beats pa. Kailangan makover din siya ng health, ng education, kasi yung epekto nun sa klase, etc. etc. So,
but actually, we came out with a data story about how Philippine heat, we've actually been experiencing Philippine heat for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And siguro hindi natin to ramdam sa Maynila. But definitely the places that are hot, is kunyari Pangasinan, Dagupan, di ba? And places that have higher humidity, yung mga lugar na yon, ramdam na ramdaman nila yung heat for the last few years.
Right.
What this tells us is, well, climate change is really, kung meron pa kayong question, kung climate change is here or it's really happening, this is it. Imbis na just the strong storms that we are already bracing for, actually in the latter half of the year, we have also to contend with extreme heat. And that is what we have realized is it seems like we're not prepared, no?
Yeah.
About extreme heat. And well, not to say na sobrang prepared din naman tayo for the typhoons,
but it surprised us.
Yeah.
Even as a tropical country, nasanay na tayo sa init. And that exactly was yung ganong klaseng complacency.
Right.
Nasanay na tayo sa init. Tapos nagulat tayo na may init pa pala.
And di ba, we knew that El Nino was coming and kailan lang nagkaroon ng El Nino, di ba? Na task force to really look into what its effects would be on livelihood, the drought that will happen in some places. So, if it tells us anything, if data tells us anything, if our experience tells us anything, it says, well, huwag nating hintayin yung susunod na mainit na panahon. Let's already prepare for what's already happening.
Yeah. And sa sobrang init, so kaya nang dumating si Aghon, naglandfall siya ng weekend, parang medyo welcome. Ano pa nga siya sa mga tao kasi lumamig. But, speaking of, so tag-ulan na ulit, and we're bracing. Actually, Pag-asa said earlier this year pa nga na we're also expecting na to feel the effects of La Nina latter part of the year.
Right.
So that's something. So after natin itakal tong El Nino, after natin siya mapagdaanan, itong extreme heat ng dry season, ngayon tag-ulan, this is what we're bracing for. Also as journalists, kasi i-cover natin siya, di ba? So, ano yung
There's
impact?
no rest for the...
No rest for the weary.
Yeah.
So, speaking of impacts ng mga ganitong extreme events, so nakita natin earlier this year din, yung landslide sa Mindanao. So, ano ba yung mga issues na nag-surface after nung landslide na yon? How probably mining exacerbates these disasters, yung tuloy-tuloy na rainfall nung February. And also, the same issue, the same long-running issue na hindi pa rin prepared yung, even though there are geohazard maps na nagsasabi na, these are critical areas, dapat wala nang nagbabahay dyan. Pero, meron pa rin. Diba?
You did a story on that actually, di ba? Na yung the mapping, parang pag tinignan mo na yung again, this is an old tale as old as time na when you look at maps, indicative naman na that those areas are more
prone
at
to
risk.
landslides.
Yeah, more prone to landslides. And then added nga, sabi mo, exacerbated by extractive activities like
Could be. Yeah.
Could be. Okay.
Dahil wala namang official probe
right.
na.
Could be. Correct.
Yeah.
But, I mean, anything that you do, di ba, that's
right.
extractive, there's about to be
have impact.
Yeah,
Right.
an impact. So, hopefully, dahil tag-ulan na, sana hindi tayo makita ng more landslides in other
Or
areas.
at least could be at least more prepared kasi it's not new. What's the story here that I wrote was 16 years this happened. Nangyari na to and nagkaroon ng reactions from lawmakers na same thing. They're saying na meron geohazard maps saying this, saying that. But we're not following it or we're not implementing it thoroughly. But when I interviewed Dr. Likhaminimo from UPRI, parang it's not just an environment thing, it's not just a science thing, it's an LGU.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it comes down to who's going to implement this hazard maps, diba?
Yeah.
Like, it can be there forever, scientists could keep
Yeah.
saying it's available, but if the LGUs are not using it, or not planning around that map, those maps, diba? Parang, then the cycle just continues.
Yeah.
So it's going to be about the local officials who are going to are they going to be reactive? Naggagawa lang ba sila imumove lang ba nila yung communities whenever, tapos
Kapag
na, pag may na landslide na? Or,
So, nagiging reactive yung
right.
approach.
Or are we going to be proactive about it and tell these LGUs, or the LGUs themselves, deciding for themselves that, okay, these people are in harm's way. Parang, let's move them to another place.
Yeah.
A safer place na based din on maps. Kasi baka naman ilagay mo sa,
Right.
sa more dangerous areas, diba?
So speaking of LGUs and maps and land use in general, so what month was that? I think it was in March or April na meron nag-viral from a travel vlog of a resort
Right.
that was smack in the middle of Chocolate Hills.
Sobrang nagulantangan lahat kasi you would have thought na siguro yung nag-post no nakala niya.
Oo, actually yung post
it's so
niya,
harmless
it was,
when it was posted.
I think he thought it was harmless.
Yeah.
Na parang masaya dito, try nyo dito.
try
Parang
nyo.
ganun
Right.
yung peg ng post na saw the original
But
post.
where we are now, di ba?
Yeah.
How many months in? A few months into when that story broke, when we knew that resorts, not just one, but a few resorts were being built in the middle of Chocolate Hills.
Yeah.
Siyempre, that launched congressional hearings, a few congressional
I was
hearings.
there the
diba?
last time sa house, yung
Right.
last hearing.
Also, the latest update is, of course, the ombudsman already ordered the preventive suspension of provincial officials. So, not just from the governor down to officials who are from different agencies, local agencies. So, what does that tell us? Na, again, reactive na naman tayo. Wala, na-build na yung mga resorts.
Yeah.
The damage has been done. Maybe it's like a wake-up call for us na when we say these areas are protected, anong level of protection ba talaga yung ibinibigay natin for these areas that bring so much, other than maganda sila and it's a pride for our country, it brings so much revenue through tourism. Diba? And they could say na, kasi tourism yun, kaya diba, resort and all. But there's a way to protect these areas that are very important to us as a country. Especially, di ba, the Chocolate Hills. Nakapunta ka na ba sa Chocolate Hills?
Hindi pa.
Hindi
Picture lang.
Naku, pag pumunta ka, makikita mo na yung resort.
Nakapunta na akong Bohol. Sa Panglaw kasi ako nagpunta.
Hindi ka nagpunta sa
Nag-beach ako.
Chocolate Hills. Pwede ka naman dumaan ng Chocolate Hills kahit mag-beach ka.
Nagpunta na kaming Cebu. Hopping pala.
Ayun. So, di ba, susubaybayan natin kung ano yung mga susunod because it's only a preventive suspension. What will happen next? What will happen to those resorts that are already built? What happens now to... What happened there was even the DNR had to look into its processes kasi hindi lang naman local government officials ang nag-green light ng mga project. So actually the DENR has a lot of may say talaga sila on what projects will be given environmental compliance certificates or ECCs. So it's as much the job or the role of the local governments as it is our national government.
Yeah.
Kasi if you're going to promote this as one of our tourism sites, then, di ba, parang dapat alam mo how to protect it and hindi na... Actually, nakakahiya when you think about it, di ba, na merong sumulpo doon. And then everyone, when the news broke, nagtuturuan lahat. You wrote about this, di ba?
Yeah,
Na parang,
how messy paperwork and governance
na parang
led to a
everyone-
resort.
supposedly were caught.
Yeah.
Parang hindi nila, parang off guard. Pero, but then again, the paperwork shows na it's not like that. The story, there's a different story to it. And, well, that's still unfolding. Ano bang naging ano dun sa last Congress?
Yeah, but when I wrote that story, nung sinabi ko na this is how messy paperwork and governance led to a resort, parang I don't remember if I said to resorts or to a resort. I don't know if singular or plural yung nilagay ko doon. But I was operating under the impression na may resort, tas meron pang mga paunti-unti. But apparently, this is not new. And I think this is also an interesting... I don't think we have to weigh on it now, but this is an interesting topic on the whole protected area dialogue. Kasi nung last House hearing, pinakita ng DNR Regional Office yung mapa ng land use sa Chocolate Hills. So since the 20s, ginagamit na talaga yung lupa. Like, may residential, may ano. And then, so that was way prior before Chocolate Hills was established as a protected area under the NIPES Act. So, makikita mo yung parang dun pa lang sa timeline, you would see na paano na, makikita mo na ang daming storya in terms of land use and land conflict. Like, if, kung titled na yung mga lupa na yun, and majority of them, no, I forgot ano yung percentage, pero majority of lands within in the area of Chocolate Hills ay titled. So, paano siya gagawin ng LGU? Paano siya i-approach ng LGU na titled na yung lands na to from way before, and then nagkaroon ng ganitong act. Dineclare siya as protected area. And then, like, dapat, sinabi ng ordinance, dapat like 20% from the baseline, yun lang yung pwedeng gamitin, etc., etc. So, yun yung na-reveal nung last House hearing. And then, Congressman Tulfo was blaming, he was really blaming the DNR Regional Office na parang bakit hinayaan na nung panahon ng Ramos administration, bakit hindi man lang parang sinabi na hindi man lang pinakita na these lands are already titled. Hindi pwedeng, I mean, magkakaroon ng conflict when you declare it as a protected area. Pero yun. So, that already happened. That's in the past. So, what's going to happen now? I think yun pa yung wala tayong sagot. Kasi, I think, maybe something from the President, but at least from the DNR main office. Ang ginawa nila is yung application, I think, ng ECCs within the, or some...
In protected areas.
Within protected
Not just
areas,
in
structures, ay dapat sa kanila na dadaan, hindi na sa regional. So, they didn't say, it's indefinite yung period na yun kung hanggang kailan yung main office yung mag-i-implement nun. So far, yun pa naman yung concrete na development din. And then yun nga, congressional hearings congressional hearings on Chocolate Hills. Right. Tapos ayun din, sumulpot din yung issue ng Mount Apo. Nagpunta dun si Secretary Loizaga and also Senator Bato. So titingnan pa natin.
Right. And in one of our coverages dun sa our Ocean Conference in Greece, one of the commitments actually of the Philippine government, well, the DENR, is to increase the number or the percentage of protected areas by 2030. Okay. But then again, that's
quantity siya.
That's also a global commitment din kasi to increase protection. So they could say that this is just, the usual commitments. Yeah. Pero given this backdrop of what happened in Chocolate Hills and in Mount Apo, sabi mo nga. And maybe in so many places that we haven't reported yet or we haven't discovered yet, di ba? Then the government really has to, when they say they're going to protect these protected areas, kaya nga sila dineclare na protected areas eh. Parang hindi dapat afterthought or dapat hindi on paper lang sila protected. It really should show in where the money is going, where the resources are going, even the collaboration with local government officials, dapat tight yun. Hindi pwedeng nalulusutan yung local, yung provincial and even the central office. In the local, kasi di ba barangay to, isang barangay itong sa resort na to, di ba? Yeah. So parang, there has to be that, and I guess when we look at it in the context of the upcoming elections next year, di ba? And who's going to be seated in our local officials, in our local seats, dapat i-consider.
Of course, they don't want to lose their vote.
Yeah, dapat i-consider na these are protected areas that local officials should be the first ones to protect. Right?
Yeah. So, it's still an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Like, kahit na, even though we commit na padadamihin pa yung protected areas, if we're not protecting these areas now properly, it's just going to be an additional sa listahan natin ng protected areas. So, but still, I think if an area is declared protected, merong leverage na ang civil society organizations, environmentalists to demand more, diba? Kaysa sa hindi siya declared as a protected area. So another topic, another newsworthy issue.
This brings back to our 2023.
Na recently lang nangyari. And this is a landmark.
Right.
Our business tycoons partnering for the protection of the Verde Island Passage. But also we know, syempre, transparent. At some level, transparent din naman na they are also looking at building an integrated LNG facility in the Verde Island Passage. So why is this important? Kasi what do they call the VIP? Center of
marine biodiversity in the world.
Yun.
So parang naka-heart of it's a heart the center.
And our business reporter Ralph Rivas angled it this way. Ganito yung lead niya na parang Ramon Ang, Aboitiz, and Pangilinan are setting aside their business rivalry in this venture into the VIP, yung protection and also yung integrated LNG facility. What do you think about that? Kasi parang some would say na of course nandun na yung conflict of interest kasi they're businesses, they're in it for the profit.
Right.
It's parang how would that work with the work of conservation and preservation na alam naman natin shouldn't work under the principle of or under sa ng profit, 'di ba? Pero also some would say na sila yung may resources to sponsor studies sa mga ganitong critical areas. Sila din yung may resources if we want to conserve these areas. Parang how does that?
Sabi mo na nga, they have the resources. But I'm not sure if, given that there should have been already by now an aggressive push into renewable, that we should, the resources should be put in. Di ba ito naman yung debate about the LNG facilities and how this is just a transitional, di ba, a transition energy.
That it's still dirty because of methane emissions.
So kung if there are resources and it's coming from the biggest tycoons in the Philippines, should we really be putting those resources in something that supposedly iiwan din natin eventually, 'di ba? Parang we're investing like parang we're building new facilities kasi, 'di ba? Yun naman yung naging yun yung nire-raise na concerns ng mga advocates who think that actually renewable energy is something that we should already be aggressively investing in. And I don't know if
I think there's enough I won't say enough. There is a push.
There is a
Kasi
push.
nakita natin na tumataas na talaga yung trend sa renewables. And even banks are funding more renewable energy projects. Pero yun nga, katulad nito,
Right.
there 3 tycoons are investing in an LNG facility.
Right. I don't know. Hindi ko alam. Don't have an answer for you. Iya. Other than, if it were me, wah! Kung ako yung tycoon. Kung mayaman
If you're the...
Hindi. But I know it's not that easy. There's this complicated about the transition from fossil
ito na lang.
fuels.
Maybe this is a simpler question.
Bakit ako yung tinatanong mo?
Hindi, sige, sasagot din ako. But, is it all right? Nakingi ng permission. Is it all right to feel optimistic of these projects?
Feelings mo naman yan. Di mo kailangan ipaalam sa...
Okay, sige. Hindi na rin kailangan ipaalam sa nakikinig.
Yeah. Well, if you think this is something... If anything, it's... I guess it's businesses being more mindful of... Or being... or but then again, there's this whole
maybe
issue.
not mindful. Maybe more attuned that people want.
Yeah. I don't know.
Environment
Ang dami kasing... It could go on into a whole debate about...
Yeah. Maybe another episode.
About greenwashing.
Pag may mga...
Or, the CSRs fulfilling, So, it could be... We could go on and on about this, but maybe not in this episode kasi...
Yeah, pero
hindi
may
lang
isa pa
ito lang
tayong
episode
issue
natin.
na connected dyan, which is San Miguel's
Right.
Parex.
The backpedaling.
The backpedaling.
You could say it's backpedaling,
because
right?
Ralph used that word
Yeah.
in his headline. Because in March, during a press conference on the rehabilitation of NAIA, Business Tycoon Ramon ang said na hindi na nila itutuloy yung Parex. So, Parex is this very, very, very controversial 95 billion expressway project na ino-oppose ng mga environmentalists, heritage advocates. So, maingay yung issue. And when Ramon Ang said that nung March, syempre headline siya ng...
Because for years, advocates have been opposed.
Yeah, a lot of people and a lot of groups oppose that. So, pero after, I think that's March 18. Tapos, the next day, San Miguel issued a clarification sa PSE na they're contemplates yung
So medyo a little backpedaling.
contemplates, parang they will review.
Right.
Yun. So, and then recently, ayun nga, hindi pa pala na-withdraw yung application sa Toll Regulatory Board. And a lot of groups na Raptor is in talks with, no? They also sent a letter to the EMB asking for the status of the application of ECC. Winidro ba, etc., etc. And then when I last asked the concerned official from DNR, ang sabi niya lang is, wala pang formal communication from SMC. And we're also trying to confirm with
SMC.
With SMC.
The
with
status.
SMC, yung status ng ECC. Kasi alam na natin yung status sa Toll Regulatory Board na wala pa pala talaga, hindi pa pala talaga wini-withdraw. And then, paano naman yung ECC? So, wala pa tayong confirmation doon, but at least from the government side.
But ang sabi ngayon ng SMC is that parang the backpedaling that they did is that hindi na siya, unlike yung sinabi na it will not push through. Parang it's going to, pero they're going to take into consideration. Tama ba? Yung ba yung...
Parang, I think at least the company line now is parang we're reviewing or we're looking at things. Parang we're attuned to what people are saying. It's not a no.
It's not an explicit no.
It's not a hard no until, of course, they withdraw the application. So, ayun nga, kaya groups are really pressing na makuha nila yung sagot kung na-withdraw na yung application for an environment compliance certificate. Which, I think, hindi pa nangyayari kasi sabi naman from the EMB, ay wala pang formal communication talaga.
But why is this important, Iya? Bakit tinututukan talaga ng mga groups yung Parex? And its significance where it's going to be located if ever, where it's going to be built if ever. Bakit natin siya tinututukan as an issue?
I think foremost, a lot of mobility advocates are saying na building another expressway would just push this car-centric what they call framework na ginagalawan natin ngayon, when the pivot should be on making cities livable. And what do we mean by livable? People could walk to their destinations, people could cycle safely to their destinations. So another expressway, parang
Kotse na naman.
kotse na
Right.
naman. Kotse. And the emissions, the pollution that come from these
And of course,
vehicles.
it being along the Pasig
Yeah,
River
yeah.
kasi, di ba? Which is one of the things that we also wrote about.
Yeah.
Na tinatry na nga nating i-rehabilitate yung Pasig River, but to build another expressway along the Pasig River, ano yung maiko-contribute nun? Saka, di ba, parang should we be, parang another, feeling ko na ulit yung na-distract tayo sa main issue, which is to rehabilitate the Pasig River because we're fighting another battle with the Parex.
And some advocates naman are saying na building an expressway, I think, saan ba? Doon sa, syempre hindi mismo doon sa, over, dun sa along the banks, would overshadow the heritage sites that Pasig River traverses.
Right.
And yun yung heritage is one of the main pillars kung bakit tinatry i-rehabilitate yung Pasig River back to its former glory. Diba? So it's about cultural significance, historical significance, etc., etc. Which sometimes I think people reduce to aesthetics.
Right.
The esplanade.
Or usually it takes a backseat kapag yun nga, because ang nagiging ay what is visible to the eye instead of the culture, what's being built.
Or what a car-centric society could immediately use.
Right. So yun, dami, no?
Ang dami. Sige, labas na muna tayo sa mga usapang tycoons.
Right. And let's go to the West Philippine Sea. Atin ito.
Okay.
But,
International relations naman. But recently, so what's happening in the West Philippine Sea now is, I mean, aside dun sa, as we always say in our leads, in our headlines, as tensions rise between Beijing and Manila. So on the environmental side naman, nasisira yung mga coral reefs.
In Pag-asa Island, there's a group of marine experts who conducted a series of studies in Pag-asa Island, I think the last few months, and they came out with the results of their the findings of their study that said the case in Pag-asa Island, so merong 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 case. Yeah. They're already in a degraded state.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're parang papunta pa lang doon. They're already degraded. And in your interview, in your Raptor Talk interview,
with Auntie Camara.
Yes, ang sabi niya, it's been going on for several years already, which means the damage is already there, already. And of course, the Philippine officials, they say their suspect is China, and they want China.
The PCG is saying that, not the marine experts.
Yes.
They're careful.
I said the Philippine officials. The Philippine officials said na the PCG says na it's China. They're blaming China, and they want China to be held liable for the environmental degradation in the area. Pero papaano nga ba natin yun? I mean, how do we, papaano, I guess, natin amid the tension and all the issues surrounding the West Philippine Sea. Ang dami kasi, you look at the plight of the fisher folk, the plight of our officials that are really staying in those areas. And then there's the environmental degradation. Pero I think it's important. It shouldn't take a backseat. Yung kung ano yung nangyari sa natural resources. Well, because the primary reason why may ganitong tension naman in that place is because of the natural resources in the area, di ba? So,
actually, no, I think it shouldn't take a backseat. And even our foreign affairs reporter, Bea Pupin, she said na actually West Philippine Sea is an environment issue. So, ayun, kaya minsan, yung pinag-uusapan namin. Most of the things I know about the West Philippine Sea came from her because as she covers it naman. But yun nga, maganda yung point na actually kaya nga may ganitong tensions. It all boils down to the natural resources of of the West Philippine Sea. I mean, hindi lang naman yun, pero it's really one of the main things,
Yeah.
diba? So, I did a story recently. There's a push from scientists, from economists and lawyers to survey the areas of the West Philippine Sea para malaman natin kung ano ba yung meron tayo. Kasi we'd be surprised, no? When I ask scientists, parang, what do we know about the West Philippine Sea? They would always say, onti lang. So this project is funded by the Department of Science and Technology, and it's a 3-year project. It would end in 2025. So scientists would survey.
So it's ongoing already?
It's ongoing
Okay.
already also. 2022 siya nag-start. Next year siya matatapos. So scientists are surveying different areas na Pangasinan, Zambales, of course Palawan. And then economists would evaluate it. I think it's a trend now.
Right.
Evaluate yung resources. So magkano ba to, etc., etc. So that when we're asking for liability, we can put a price on
Yeah.
it. We can
The
put a
damage.
price on the damage, and we can ask for compensation, which is what the lawyers from UP Law are doing, from IMLOS are doing. So we spoke to Jay Batambakal. He said they're reviewing domestic and legal frameworks on international maritime laws and policies. So they're looking at ano ba yung pwedeng i-apply sa legal framework ng Pilipinas. Eventually, baka pwede tayo mag-episode na si Lian or with Bea just to shed light.
We should.
Shed more light on the legal side of these, yung pag-assess ng environmental damage and asking for compensation. So there's that. So nung sinusulat ko yung story, parang very hopeful na.
But you know, ikaw kasi you're always perennially hopeful.
But
It's good to have a reporter who's perennially hopeful.
But ito sa environment meet pa. Sa climate change meet pa.
Right.
But still, diba, it's ito yung mga project na parang hindi na siya nasusulatan or hindi na siya na-feature as much because it's not really that sexy. When
Yeah.
you say, oh, we're going to evaluate the resources in the
right,
West Philippine Sea. But it's important, diba? It's important. Parang, of course, the government, the PCG would always say, we should hold China liable for the damage that's being done in the West Philippine Sea. But if we can't put a price on it, if we can't put a concrete number on it, that's just,
Right.
those are just words.
Ayan. So, this is an open invite to Bea and Lian.
For the next
episode daw. Sige, pumunta naman tayo since we're already in an international issue. Let's now go to the issues internationally that we are really focusing on.
Yeah, so after nitong, since we're halfway, anong ina-expect natin
Right.
in the latter part of the year?
And since very domestic yung mga naging issues sa pinag-usapan natin, because we are still part of a bigger
Battle.
fight against
The climate crisis.
Against the climate crisis. Of course, since we're already halfway into the year, we're already preparing for our COP29 coverage in November. That's happening in Azerbaijan, diba? And one of the issues with that conference being held in Azerbaijan, other than it's a year before the COP30 conference, but also Azerbaijan is one of the countries that is rich in oil and gas reserves. And actually, there was a Reuters report, and I quote their president. Mahirap sabihin yung name niya. Basta yung president ng Azerbaijan. Sabi niya, as the head of the country which is rich with fossil fuels, of course we will defend the right of these countries to continue investments and to continue production because the world needs it. Tapos, the next line is, but at the same time, countries with fossil fuels should be among those who demonstrate solidarity with respect to issues related to climate change. So, diba, it's a president, an official, na blatantly saying,
hosting
the climate conference.
the climate conference of the year.
Oo, without even, hindi man lang yung sinugar ko, talagang, there needs to be, at a time when we already said in our last COP, na
Going to face
we're going to face down or we're going to start the ano nga yung term nila? Basta to
transition into renewables,
yes,
diba?
na to
Triple pa nga.
transition out of fossil fuels, diba? Para at a time that we're already going in that direction, I think all climate advocates and those who are invested in this issue are really looking at a host country like this, and ano yung magiging role, ano yung magiging progress in that conference when it comes to the state or ano yung mangyari sa fossil fuels.
For those not familiar with COP, how would you describe COP to the
It's an annual
uninitiated?
it's an annual get together
Get together of the parties.
of the parties. It's an annual. It's the biggest. I would say it's the biggest conference of the United Nations and the parties to the United Nations framework of Convention of Climate Change. Ang haba kasi niya. UNFCCC. So all the parties there, including the Philippines, we gather every year to discuss progress or walang progress when in terms of our climate negotiations. Parang how the world will implement the
2015 Paris Agreement.
The historic Paris Agreement. And we're going toward, yun nga, yung ating 1.5 degree goal of how to limit our global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius,
right.
Pre-industrial.
But also to make the local listener appreciate COP29. Can you repeat what you told me yesterday? Yung
ano yan?
Yung nasa meeting tayo, nag-meeting tayo, and then we're talking about COP29, and then you said something along the lines of, but you'd be surprised, pag nasa COP ka, yung Pilipinas, para siyang hero. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess this has to do with, for a while, I think, naging poster child kasi yung Pilipinas, especially after Yolanda, when that happened. And because the images were so visual of what happened during Yolanda. That when it comes to climate resilience, parang naging ano yung Philippines.
The poster child.
Parang the poster child of it. Pero yun, I guess in climate conferences like that, our voice matters. And you can see that in the negotiations where we are really, pinapakinggan talaga ang boses ng Pilipinas. So, especially in the loss and damage negotiations, di ba? Talagang from the very start, even before nagkaroon ng before siya na last year, talagang the Philippines, its negotiators have been active in the loss and damage, in pushing for a loss and damage fund. And so, now we're going into that, yung how to implement that, the mechanism of the loss and damage. So, our hope is that hindi lang tayo maging poster child, but that we are actually heard in where it matters, in negotiation tables. And kaya, alam ko yung mga groups ngayon, as early as May, we're already in touch. They're already in touch with the Climate Change Commission, for instance, our negotiators, para aligned yung kung ano yung magiging positions ng Philippines. It's aligned with what groups are pushing for. So that there's that. So hindi lang nangyayari lahat ng negotiations in November. It happens as early as the first half of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing.
Yeah.
And even after COP.
And even after COP, like the work continues talaga.
But this is what I like about COP. I mean, I know we always criticize it as wala naman nangyayari. There's very little progress. Right. Yung conference, it's attended by a lot of fossil fuel lobbyists, and a lot of people are questioning its integrity. Na parang hino-host siya ng oil states, etc. But yung ganitong dynamic, I won't say it levels the playing field, but nagkakaroon talaga ng dynamic na civil society organizations are communicating with, at least the CCC,
right.
diba? Although there are issues, of course, na parang some organizations are saying na sa mismong COP na hindi sila binibigyan ng plataforma, lalo na nagkaroon ng Philippine Pavilion last year.
Right.
But these conversations are happening, like as early as now. Parang it really spurred that kind of dynamic na hindi mo naman din talaga pwedeng sabihin nila,
But I guess, that's what's complicated about these negotiations to begin with, that they don't involve just countries, they don't involve just nations, they involve people who hold those nations accountable, advocates, diba, all over the world. So, that's why it's tricky. And that's why it's taken so long to see progress, because there are so many inputs that you have to take into consideration.
And speaking of treaties and international negotiations, so this takes much less of a spotlight than COP29. Pero in the same month that COP will happen, magkakaroon rin ng negotiations on the future global plastic treaty. So basically, the idea is magkaroon na ng legally binding agreement sa pagtakal ng plastic pollution crisis.
Right.
Yeah. And I think part of the Philippine delegation, at least nung nagkaroon ng negotiations earlier this year sa Canada, was Jonas Leones of DNR. So I think two officials from DNR. I'm just not sure kung nandun sila sa Canada. Pero sila yung nakalagay dun sa papel ng sa paper ng Philippine delegation. Yeah. So I think sa akin lang, yung surprising lang dito is this is going to be the first legally binding agreement. If it's approved.
Yeah, but
tackling the plastic pollution, given na ang tagal-tagal na nating alam. And sobrang dami nang nagsa-sound ng alarm about the plastic problem.
I think even the plastic pollution crisis is just as important as the climate crisis, because it really affects our oceans. It really affects so much of our entire ecosystem, and not just that, our health even, di ba? Parang sobrang affected ng plastic pollution. I think one of the sticking points daw in the negotiations is that, yun nga, it's legally binding. There are calls na hindi siya gawing legally binding. Na parang ano lang siya, magkaroon ng voluntary, parang the same way na parang may nationally determined contributions. Instead of talagang merong member states na merong binding na global rules. So merong ganong push and pull about the negotiations. There's also, syempre yung some of the pinag-uusapan sa negotiations is that if you're going to look into the full cycle of the plastic, the life cycle of a plastic, or dun lang ba sa waste. Na-produce na, ano nang gagawin with the waste. But there's, ang negotiations is that dapat from the start pa lang.
Yeah. Of course, organizations would argue na dapat yung life cycle, but that would really upset the status quo.
Right.
And are we ready? Kasi what's I think, at least sa nakikita ko, what's tricky here is that it concerns multinational
of course
corporations.
Yeah.
Kaya, would they really cut down plastic? Siguro i-recycle, ganyan. Pero yung sa start pa lang, sa production, sa manufacturing, it's going to be a different conversation.
Yeah. Diba? Hindi pa nga tayo wala pa nga tayong sobrang lakas na from the negotiations, climate negotiations. And then there's this.
But dahil nagkakaroon ng mga ganitong legally binding agreements, people are now more empowered. Are we saying more empowered to file climate lawsuits? So that's happening around the world.
Ang dami ng avenues for people to raise their concerns, hindi lang parang raising it through awareness. There's also the climate lawsuits that are being filed. There seems to be a global wave of climate litigation in the world, from international courts to even local courts. And what we're seeing here is, I think, that parang most of this are parang hindi mo naman siya kunyari may nanalo in the international courts. They're difficult to enforce locally.
Yeah.
Diba? Yun naman yung pinaka-issue sa mga ganitong climate litigation. But I think what it does is it signals na the world is looking, the world is watching. Diba? Yeah. So you can't just go with the status quo, just continue with the status quo, because people are now using these avenues to raise awareness, not just awareness, but to really hold accountable people who are not really prioritizing the protection and the conservation of our environment.
Yeah, and it also goes to show na people are really exhausting all the tools, the resources
available
na meron sila to make these companies, the states, accountable for what you're doing to the world. To the world.
To the
Anyway.
world.
Okay, so, ang dami na natin.
Yeah.
Ang dami na natin.
And that's just half of the year.
That's just half of the year. Ang dami pa natin i-expect in the coming months, the coming year. And I hope our environment cluster in Rappler would end with a bang sa coverage natin sa mga ganito. Okay.
Stay strong. Stay
Stay
strong.
strong, stay strong. So, thank you, G, so much for all the insights. Guest!
Guest ako.
For more news and updates about all things environment, join the Environment and Science chat room of the Rappler Communities app. You can download the Rappler Communities app on your mobile. It is available to download on iOS and Android. You can also access it via desktop at communities.rappler.com. Kita-kits sa Rappler Communities app. Till the next episode. Bye!
Bye.